According to Jewish News at the Times of Israel, there have been 86 reports of anti-Semitic incidents in the past 10 days, according to the Community Security Trust. New statistics published on Monday confirmed a staggering 438% rise in such incidents since hostilities between Israel and the Palestinians erupted on May 6th. Of the 86 anti-Semitic incidents, almost all of them, 83, involved language, imagery, or behavior linking them to the conflict in Israel and Gaza. This is, of course, not a giant shock. This is happening all over the world. Unfortunately, it's happening in Britain. It is happening in the United States. There are people in Britain who are driving cars down the street, literally chanting, "Kill the Jews." We had here in Florida, there was a van driving around with it was a very weird van. It said Hitler was right and also the Holocaust didn't happen. You need to pick one of those for that to make any sense. In Los Angeles, my old haunts, there's a full-on anti-Semitic attack. Apparently, this group of Palestinians pro-Palestinian advocates decided they were driving down La Cienega Boulevard, which is a major thoroughfare in LA, for those who don't know the geography. And they went to a restaurant and they asked, who here is Jewish? And then they jumped out of their trucks and started trying to attack these Jews. It turned into like a full-on physical confrontation. One person was hospitalized. You can say they started hitting people with lead pipes, approaching these Jews on the street. These Jews were just sitting there eating at a sushi restaurant, by the way. Right, and one person ended up in the hospital. So that's what's happening in L.A. Over in L.A., there was also an Orthodox Jew who's they tried to chase him down. This is near La Brea. This is from a security camera. You can see there's an Orthodox Jew who is apparently being chased by a truck with a Palestinian flag. Over in New York, there's some Jews who are on the street and who were attacked by a group of pro-Palestinian protesters. They started throwing objects at them and throwing bottles, and cops came in to try and break it up. So unfortunately, this sort of stuff is happening pretty regularly. I spoke to friends in LA the other day. They're walking home from Shul on Shavuot, which is one of the Jewish high holidays. And there are three big ones. And people were driving apparently past them, shouting Allahu Akbar. So good times happening. The stupidest response that you can have to this as a Jew or a person who likes Jews is this is all about Israel, because it clearly is not. Jews are being attacked on the street, and it's not because of Israel. This is the part that always is hilarious to me. There are a bunch of anti-Semitic folks out there, and they're like, well, if Israel didn't exist, well, then this wouldn't be happening. You're right. Before Israel, there was no anti-Semitism. It's amazing. It is explicitly because of anti-Semitism like this that Israel does exist. The founder of Zionism, Theodor Herzl, he was not a particularly religious person. His explicit goal was there needs to be a place where Jews can be safe. And he said this in the aftermath of the Dreyfus Affair, which was this famous French incident in which massive anti-Semitism broke out in France over false allegations that a Jewish officer had been spying for the Austro-Hungarian Empire. It was not true. Okay, but Herzl ended up founding Zionism because of that. But the logic from anti-Semites is always the same. This is all because of Israel. If it weren't for Israel, then Jews would be able to live in peace and harmony wherever else in the world, or in a binational state or something. Why do you need Israel? Because if there were no Israel, there would be nobody to defend a lot of Jews around the world. We don't have to go very far back in history to remember that anti-Semitism sort of predates the state of Israel. Israel was established legally in 1947-48, and the Holocaust was like 2 years before that. So but don't worry, you have morons like Sarah Silverman who are going to attempt to dissociate from the state of Israel, and then she can make alliance, presumably, with these anti-Semites. She tweeted out, Jews in the diaspora need allies. We are not Israel, and we sure as hell aren't the Israeli government. Thank you to the Mensch in gray, right? So there's a person who went and defended some of the Jews. We're not the Israeli government. We need allies. We're not Israel. Yeah, Sarah, if you shout it loud enough, if you shout that Israel doesn't have a duty to defend its citizens, and if you shout solidarity with Hamas, probably the anti-Semites will leave you alone. Because historically speaking, when there was no Israel, there was no anti-Semitism. And certainly there was not even anti-Semitism in the Holy Land itself, where Jews were murdered en masse by Arab terrorists in, for example, the 1929 Hebron riots. People who show their neck to anti-Semites, not good people. Facts don't care about your feelings, and it's a fact that The Ben Shapiro Show is the largest conservative podcast in the nation. Be sure to hit the subscribe button to stay up to date on all of our content.